You? My pilot? She scoffed until he flew the ship through a meteor storm. The docking bay of Waystation Tarsus smelled like recycled air and desperation. Ethan Cross figured both applied to him equally as he stood beside the boarding ramp of Persephone's Gambit, watching the approach corridor with the resignation of someone who knew this contract would either save his career or bury it. The freighter behind him was older than his reputation and twice as battered, but her engines were sound. Movement at the far end of the bay made him straighten. His passenger emerged from the umbilical corridor, and Ethan felt his stomach drop. She was easily 7 feet tall, moving with predatory grace. Porcelain skin caught the harsh station lighting with luminescent quality, her face all sharp angles and full lips. But her hair stopped him cold, cascading crimson tendrils that moved independently, flowing around her shoulders. Ornate armor in blues and golds spoke of rank, and the small diadem among those crimson strands marked her as someone important. A Calvex enforcer, of course. She stopped 3 meters from the ramp, amber eyes with vertical pupils tracking across the Gambit's scarred hull. "You are Ethan Cross," she said, her voice carrying that particular Calvex resonance. "Last time I checked. I am Severin, enforcer of the Calvex 3rd Territorial Fleet. Station Administrator Quinn assured me that despite your history, you are capable of flying this vessel to Waystation Meridian without incident." The pause before history landed like a slap. "Quinn's not usually wrong," he said. Severin's tendrils rippled. "For both our sakes, I hope that remains true. I will inspect the ship now." She moved past him up the ramp without waiting for permission. Ethan followed, biting back responses that would only make this worse. The main cabin was cramped but clean, systems humming with steady power. He watched her move through the space, impossibly long fingers trailing across consoles, her entire posture radiating skepticism. "Your life support parameters are within acceptable range," she said, surprised. "I run a tight ship. This vessel appears held together through optimism and improvisation." "Same thing, really." She turned to face him fully, and he was struck by how much space she occupied. "Optimism is not a flight plan, Mr. Cross. The frontier reach requires precision. My cargo is time-sensitive and cannot afford delays caused by mechanical failure or navigational error." The emphasis on navigational error hit exactly where she meant it. Everyone knew about Vega Station. Everyone knew about the 3 crew members who died because he'd trusted instinct over sensor data. "I've been flying this route for 2 years without incident," he said. "How reassuring. In 2 years you have managed not to repeat the mistake that killed your previous crew." The silence stretched between them like hull breach pressure. "We launch in 20 minutes, he said quietly. "Secure your cargo and strap in unless you want to find out firsthand how Optimism handles 3G acceleration." He didn't wait to see if she followed, dropping into the pilot's seat and initiating pre-flight sequences. The controls responded like old friends, and he let the familiar routine calm the anger in his chest. Behind him, Severin settled into the co-pilot's seat, crash restraints adjusting for her height. "Your departure vector is inefficient," she said. "It avoids the commercial lanes, less traffic, fewer complications. It also adds 40 minutes to our transit time. Feel free to fly yourself if you know better." Her tendrils lifted slightly, but she said nothing else as he brought the engines online and requested departure clearance. Station control granted it immediately, and Ethan guided the Gambit through the dock clamps with smooth precision. The frontier reach opened before them, that vast darkness between established routes where independent operators made their living. He set their course and felt the engines settle into steady burn that would carry them to Meridian in just under 6 hours. "Navigation locked," he said. "Smooth flying from here unless—" The proximity alarm shrieked, and his hands were moving before conscious thought caught up. 3 contacts had appeared on their tail vector, close enough that they must have been running dark. No transponders, weapon signatures hot, acceleration curves that spoke of military-grade engines in civilian hulls. "Interceptors," Severin said, voice sharp. "They're targeting us." "I noticed," Ethan snapped, already spinning the Gambit into evasive pattern. "Any chance these are friends of yours?" The Calvex do not ambush their own assets with unmarked vessels. Then they're after your cargo, which means you brought trouble to my ship without warning. I assumed your criminal contacts would be the greater risk. Ethan ignored that, focusing on the intercept vectors as the lead ship opened fire. The shot went wide, a warning or bad aim, but the message was clear. They wanted the Gambit disabled, not destroyed. That gave him maybe 30 seconds to decide between surrender and something monumentally stupid. Ahead on the navigation display, the Tarsus debris field waited like an open mouth. "Strap in tight," he said. "What are you?" "I said strap in." He cut the main engines and fired maneuvering thrusters in sequence, the Gambit pivoting hard enough that unsecured equipment crashed against bulkheads. Severin made a sound he couldn't interpret, her hands gripping the console, and then he was accelerating directly toward the debris field at velocity that made the ship's frame groan. "This is suicide," Severin said, her voice carrying something that might have been fear. "Sensors cannot navigate those conditions. No pilot can fly blind through." "Watch me," Ethan said, and drove them into the storm. The universe became noise and violence. Asteroids the size of buildings tumbled past in chaotic orbits, surfaces scarred by centuries of collisions. Derelict ship hulls spun like dead leaves, edges sharp enough to slice through shields. Ethan's hands moved across the controls in patterns that had no logic beyond instinct, micro-adjustments happening faster than thought, his entire focus narrowing to the space immediately ahead where gaps appeared and closed in heartbeats. Something massive loomed out of the darkness, a fragment of ice and iron easily the size of a transport bus, tumbling end over end directly into their path. Too close for course correction, too fast for reversal. Severin's tendrils flattened completely against her skull, and he heard her breath catch. Ethan killed the engines. The sudden absence of thrust made his stomach lurch, and then his hands were flying across the thruster controls, firing them in sequence that rotated the Gambit 90 degrees, the deck tilting beneath them as the ship spun on its axis. They slid sideways through the gap with centimeters to spare, the asteroid's surface close enough that he could see impact craters on its face, close enough to read registry numbers on embedded debris. Severin made a sound that might have been prayer or curse. Then something hit them from behind. The impact threw him against his restraints hard enough to bruise, alarms shrieking as the port nacelle tore away in a cascade of sparks and venting plasma. The Gambit shuddered like a wounded animal, systems failing in sequence across his board, and Ethan fought the controls as they tumbled out of the debris field's far side, trailing fire and emergency warnings. Behind them, the interceptors were gone, lost in the storm or smart enough not to follow. Ahead, his navigation display showed empty space and the distant marker for a moon with minimal atmosphere and abandoned mining facilities. 3 hours away on failing engines. "Status," Severin said, remarkably steady for someone who'd just survived the impossible. "We're alive," Ethan said, already running damage assessments, "but that's about all I can guarantee right now." Her amber eyes found his across the cockpit, and something in her expression had shifted, the contempt replaced by calculation that felt almost like respect. "That maneuver," she said slowly, "with the rotation, that should not have been possible." "Welcome to human unpredictability," he said, turning back to his console where warning lights painted his face in shades of emergency red. "Hope you packed for an extended stay." The engine compartment was never designed for someone Severin's height, yet she moved through it with grace. Ethan watched her brace a structural support while he welded the power coupling, her strength holding the damaged section steady without visible effort. "Rotate it counterclockwise," he said. She complied without argument. Her ceremonial armor lay discarded in the main cabin, leaving her in a fitted undersuit that revealed lean muscle beneath porcelain skin. "This configuration violates basic engineering protocols," she said, watching him splice components never meant to interface. "It also keeps us breathing. How does improvisation like this not result in catastrophic failure?" "Sometimes it does," Ethan admitted, "but perfect solutions aren't always available, so you work with what you have." Her tendrils shifted in consideration. Your species approaches problem-solving like combat, aggressive, instinctive, accepting risk as inevitable. And yours approaches it like surgery, precise, calculated, eliminating risk before it exists. Yet your method kept us alive when mine would have resulted in surrender or death. Ethan paused mid-weld to look at her. Her amber eyes met his without flinching, something there that hadn't existed in the docking bay. Curiosity, maybe respect. Your rotation maneuver in the debris field, she continued, the timing required, the spatial awareness without sensor guidance, it should have been impossible. Impossible just means nobody bothered trying hard enough. A sound escaped her that might have been laughter, quick and surprised, before her expression smoothed. But her tendrils remained relaxed, drifting slightly. They finished repairs in comfortable silence. By the time they coaxed enough power to reach the moon, something unspoken had shifted between them. The abandoned mining station clung to the barren rock, its habitation module still functional despite decades of neglect. Ethan got life support running while Severin secured the perimeter. The thin atmosphere outside would keep them alive but not comfortable. Cold would seep through aging insulation within hours. Heating unit is damaged, he said. I can jury-rig something, but it won't be pleasant. I have survived worse conditions. Doesn't mean you should have to. She studied him, and he felt her attention like physical weight. You concern yourself with my comfort despite our situation. Force of habit. My mother raised me to be polite, even when people insult my flying. I did not insult your flying. I questioned your continued existence. This time he laughed, genuine and surprised. Watching her tendrils lift in what he was learning meant pleasure. While he worked on the heating unit, Severin conducted inventory. When she spoke again, her voice carried weight that made him stop working. You should know what you're transporting. My cargo is not simple medical supplies. Ethan straightened, wiping grease from his hands. I figured that out when interceptors tried to kill us. Dr. Amira Okonkwo, Severin said carefully, a human xenobiologist. She carries evidence of illegal Calvex military operations, bioexperimentation on human colonists in disputed territories, genetic modification, neural restructuring without consent. Many died. The words landed like physical blows. Your people did that? Military contractors operating beyond official oversight. But yes, my people. She met his eyes, genuine pain there. I was ordered to transport her and the evidence to human authorities. Internal investigation, they said. And you believed them? I wanted to. Her tendrils drooped, but the attack suggests otherwise. She looked exhausted, stripped of regal certainty, just a person carrying impossible weight. Why tell me? Because you risked your life to keep us alive. You deserve to know what you are protecting. And if I decide it's not worth the trouble, then we die here together because I cannot complete this mission alone. She paused, but I do not think you will abandon her. Humans struggle to ignore injustice, even when logic says you should. She was right. Ethan returned to the heating unit, working in silence while his mind churned. Finally, he got it running, barely, but enough. That night, unable to sleep in the cold station, they shared watch shifts. Severin spoke first, her voice quiet in darkness. In my culture, emotional expression is considered weakness, instability that compromises judgment. Sounds lonely. It is efficient. Efficiency and effectiveness aren't the same thing. You can be perfectly efficient at making the wrong choice. Her tendrils moved slowly in patterns he couldn't read. Tell me about your crew, the ones who died. The request surprised him, but darkness made honesty easier. Navigation error. I trusted instinct over sensor data near a gravity well, miscalculated. They didn't suffer, if that matters, but they trusted me, and I killed them through arrogance. You made a mistake. That does not make you a killer. Doesn't make them less dead. No, she agreed softly. But you flying through that debris field, that was not arrogance. That was courage born from experience, even painful experience. You trusted yourself again because someone else needed you to. Her words hit deeper than expected. Your culture teaches that attachment is weakness, he said. But watching you talk about those colonists, seeing your guilt and determination, that's not weakness. That's the strongest thing I've seen. Severin turned to look at him. In dim emergency lighting, her bioluminescence created subtle patterns along her skin, beautiful and alien and somehow familiar. She reached out to adjust his heating unit, her hand brushing his. Her skin was cool, smoother than human touch, and neither pulled away immediately. The contact lasted only seconds, but Ethan felt it like electricity, awareness flooding through him. Her tendrils drifted toward him, one strand brushing his shoulder before she caught herself and drew back. The movement was instinctive, uncontrolled, and her expression showed surprise at her own response. "I should check the perimeter," she said, voice unsteady. "Severin, I need to check the perimeter." She left before he could respond, and Ethan sat in the cold station feeling the ghost of her touch and wondering what was happening between them. The encrypted transmission arrived 3 hours later, waking them both. Severin's face went carefully blank as she read it. "Thrace," she said quietly, "my former commanding officer." She played the message. A Calvex male with slate-gray skin and severe features materialized in holographic form. "Severin, you will abort this mission immediately and return to Calvex space. The evidence Dr. Okonkwo carries is stolen property containing classified military operations. You are ordered to surrender her to Calvex custody and report for debriefing." Thrace's expression hardened. The experiments were necessary. Humans are inferior biologically and need improvement to survive integration with advanced species. We were helping them, regardless of their primitive inability to understand. By exposing this research, you betray everything our culture stands for. Return now, or face court-martial for treason. The transmission ended. Silence filled the station like vacuum. "Helping them," Ethan said, voice dangerously quiet. "He calls torture and murder helping." "He believes it," Severin said, staring at empty holographic space. "He truly believes humans are inferior and need correction." "And you? Do you believe that?" She turned to face him, conflict written across her features. "I was taught to believe it. My entire life, every lesson, every cultural message, humans are chaotic, primitive, emotionally unstable, dangerous to themselves and others without proper guidance." "That's not an answer." "Because I do not have one." Her voice cracked slightly. "Everything I was taught says he is right. Everything I have experienced with you says he is wrong. How do I reconcile that?" "You choose," Ethan said. "You look at the evidence, and I don't mean data. I mean what you've seen with your own eyes, and you choose what you believe." "And if I choose wrong?" "Then you're no different than me flying through that debris field. You trust yourself and deal with the consequences." Severin's tendrils flattened against her skull, stress response he recognized. "If I refuse Thrace's orders, I am exiled, court-martialed, everything I have built, my entire identity." "Your identity is following orders, even when they're wrong. You do not understand what you are asking me to sacrifice." "I understand perfectly," Ethan snapped, years of resentment rising. "Your comfortable superiority complex. Your species gets to play civilization police while humans are treated like children who need supervision. Maybe Thrace is right about one thing. Maybe your culture is exactly as arrogant and oppressive as it looks." The words hung between them like detonation. "Get out," Severin said, voice cold and precise. "We're on a rock with no atmosphere." "Then go check something. Anything. Just leave." Ethan grabbed his suit jacket and headed for the airlock, anger and guilt churning in his chest. Behind him, he heard something crash against a bulkhead, Severin's careful control finally shattering. Outside in the thin, freezing air, staring at stars that didn't care about their problems, Ethan wondered if some gaps were simply too wide to bridge. Dawn came to the barren moon with harsh light that made everything look more desolate. Ethan returned to the station to find Severin already working on the ship, her movements precise but lacking their usual grace. She didn't acknowledge him as he approached. "Long-range sensors are picking up something," she said without preamble. 3 ships, Syndicate configuration, tracking our position." Ethan felt his stomach drop. "How did they find us?" "Unknown, but they will be in firing range within 2 hours." He moved past her into the cockpit, checking readings. She was right. 3 contacts approaching at commercial speeds, trying to look routine until they got close enough to strike. He started emergency pre-flight, hands moving across controls with practiced efficiency. They worked in brittle silence, last night's fight hanging between them like radiation. Ethan wanted to apologize, wanted to take back the words about her culture, but didn't know how to bridge the gap he'd created. Severin kept her distance, her tendrils held rigid against her skull in a control that looked painful. "I refused Thrace's orders," she said suddenly, not looking at him. "This morning I sent my response." Ethan stopped mid-diagnostic. "You did?" "I told him that exposing atrocities is not betrayal. It is the only path to actual honor. That if our culture cannot survive truth, it deserves to fall." Her hands stilled on the console. "I am exiled now. Court-martial will follow. Everything I built is gone." The weight of what she'd sacrificed hit him like physical force. "Severin, I'm sorry. Last night what I said." "You were right," she interrupted, finally meeting his eyes. "My culture is arrogant. We have hidden behind superiority while committing horrors, and I have been complicit through silence." She paused. "But you were also wrong. I am not choosing this mission over my career. I am choosing it because you made me understand that courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting despite it." Before he could respond, proximity alarms shrieked. The Syndicate ships had abandoned pretense, accelerating hard on intercept vector. "We need to go now," Ethan said, already firing engines. The Gambit shuddered as it lifted on failing systems, warning lights painting the cockpit red. Severin strapped in beside him, her hands moving to weapons controls without being asked. The first ship achieved firing range as they broke atmosphere, plasma bolts scorching past their hull. "They are trying to disable us, not destroy," Severin observed. "They want Dr. Okonkwo alive. Then we use that. They will hesitate before lethal force." Ethan grinned despite everything. "You're learning to think like a human. Do not insult me while I'm saving your life." This time her tone carried something that might have been warmth, and Ethan felt hope flicker in his chest. He threw the Gambit into evasive pattern, using every trick he'd learned in 2 years of running questionable cargo through hostile space. Severin monitored threats, calling out vectors with the calm precision of someone trained for combat, and he realized they were coordinating without thinking about it. His chaos feeding her strategy, her discipline grounding his instinct. The second Syndicate ship tried to flank them, and Severin made a decision that would have horrified her species. She overrode safety protocols and rerouted power from life support to weapons, giving them one shot at disabling the lead pursuer. "That will cost us oxygen reserves," Ethan said. "I know, do you trust me?" The question hung between them, loaded with everything they hadn't said. "Yeah," he said, "I do." "Then on my mark. He cut engines while she fired, the bolt catching the Syndicate ship's main thruster at the precise moment their shields cycled. The ship spun out of formation, venting plasma, and Ethan used the chaos to accelerate past their firing solution. But the maneuver cost them. Their remaining engine reserves dropped to critical, leaving them coasting on momentum toward a commercial shipping lane hours away. The Syndicate ships pursued, but couldn't close the gap without overshooting, settling into holding pattern behind them. "Standoff," Severin said. "They will wait for reinforcements. Then we better hope someone friendly responds to our distress beacon." They drifted in tense silence, rationing power and oxygen. The cockpit grew cold as life support struggled, and Ethan found himself hyper-aware of Severin beside him, her breathing steady and controlled while his own came quick and shallow. "I should not have left last night," she said quietly. "Not like that. I shouldn't have said those things." "You said what you believed, what you had every right to believe, given what my species has done." She turned to face him. "But I need you to understand. I have always envied humanity's emotional freedom, how humans can express fear or joy or love without being viewed as mentally unstable. Everything I was taught about emotional discipline is crumbling, because what I feel for you does not feel like weakness. It feels like the first honest thing I have experienced." Her words stole his breath. Ethan reached across the narrow space between their seats, his hand finding hers where it rested on the console. Her cool skin against his warmth felt right in ways he couldn't articulate. "Your culture taught you wrong," he said. "What you're feeling, that's not instability, that's being alive." Her tendrils relaxed for the first time since the argument, drifting toward him with their curious sentience. One strand wrapped gently around his wrist, and he felt the subtle pulse beneath her skin, her biology responding to proximity. "In my language, we have no word for what humans call love," she said. "We have bonding protocols and reproductive contracts, but nothing that encompasses choice and vulnerability and a rational commitment to another's well-being. Maybe you need a new word. Or maybe we need to borrow yours." The moment stretched between them, intimate despite their circumstances. Then Severin's datapad chimed, and she reluctantly pulled away to check it. "Dr. Okonkwo's testimony," she said, "recorded for transmission if we reach authorities. Would you like to hear it?" Ethan nodded, and Severin activated the recording. A woman's voice filled the cockpit, measured, professional, describing atrocities with clinical precision. Human colonists taken without consent, subjected to genetic modification and neural restructuring to optimize them for Calvec's labor standards. The death toll. The families never notified. The justification that humans needed improvement to survive integration with superior species. Ethan watched Severin's face while the testimony played, seeing her struggle between righteous anger at her species and visible effort not to project collective guilt onto individual actions. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. "I don't blame you for what they did." "You should." "Why? You're the one trying to expose it." He squeezed her hand. "In your culture, witnessing atrocity and remaining silent, you said that's equal to committing it. You're not silent. That's what matters." She looked at him with something approaching wonder, like she couldn't quite believe he was real. "How do you do that?" she asked. "See individuals rather than species? Trust despite having every reason not to?" "Because someone once told me that courage is trusting yourself and dealing with the consequences." Seemed like good advice. A small smile touched her lips, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, making her look younger and somehow more vulnerable. The rescue came via an independent freight hauler whose captain recognized Ethan's distress beacon. The battered cargo ship pulled alongside, extending umbilical corridor, and Ethan felt relief wash through him as oxygen-rich air flooded their dying cockpit. The captain was older, weathered by years in space, and his eyes widened when he saw Severin. "Heard about you two on the feeds, the pilot and the enforcer who refused orders." He shook his head. "You've got guts, I'll give you that. Also got half the sector wanting your heads, but I'll get you to Meridian. Figure you earned safe passage." He left them in assigned quarters, small but functional, with actual heat and breathable air that felt like luxury. Alone for the first time since the argument, exhaustion and relief overwhelmed restraint. Ethan reached for Severin first, his hand cupping her jaw with unexpected gentleness given everything they'd survived. His fingers brushed against the edge of her pointed ear, and she leaned into the touch with a sound that was almost a purr, her crimson tendrils wrapping around his wrist like silk. Their first kiss was careful, exploring the differences between their mouths, her fangs and his softer human lips, her cool skin against his warmth. She tasted like something he had no reference for, alien and intoxicating. Her hands found his shoulders, claws retracted, holding him with strength she kept carefully controlled. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Severin rested her forehead against his. "This complicates everything," she whispered. "Yeah," Ethan agreed, his thumb tracing patterns on her cheekbone where faint bioluminescence pulsed beneath her skin. "But complicated is fine. Nothing worth having was ever simple. Your species has very poor survival instincts." "Probably, but we're still here, aren't we?" She laughed, soft and genuine, and Ethan decided that sound was his new favorite discovery in the entire universe. Waystation Meridian erupted into political firestorm within hours of Dr. Okonkwo presenting her evidence. Ethan watched news feeds from the station's gallery, seeing Calvec's diplomatic corps scrambling to contain the scandal while human activist groups demanded sanctions. Beside him, Severin stood rigid, her tendrils held in tight control as her image appeared on screen after screen. The Calvex enforcer, who chose justice over loyalty. "They are calling me traitor," she said quietly. "Some are, others are calling you hero. Both are equally terrifying." Death threats arrived from extremists on both sides, Calvex who viewed her as betrayer, and humans who refused to believe any of her species could be trusted. Station security suggested they separate for safety, but Ethan refused to leave her side. "I am infinitely more capable in combat than you," Severin pointed out. "I know, but you're not doing this alone." She looked at him with that expression he was learning to read, gratitude mixed with something deeper, something her species had no name for. "Your presence is not liability," she said softly. "It is anchor, the thing keeping me grounded when everything I have known is disintegrating." The moment broke when alarms shrieked through the station. Ethan's instincts kicked in before conscious thought. The sound pattern meant hull breach, explosive decompression. Security feeds showed armored figures flooding the diplomatic quarter where Dr. Okonkwo was testifying. "Syndicate," Severin said, already moving. "Final move to eliminate the doctor before her testimony concludes." They ran through corridors filling with panicked civilians, Ethan trusting Severin's predatory grace to navigate the chaos. Security forces were collapsing under coordinated assault, designed to extract or eliminate Dr. Okonkwo before evidence became official record. Severin made instant tactical assessment. "We need to get her to evacuation ships, but the direct route is a kill zone." "Then we create a diversion," Ethan said, mind already racing through station schematics. "I can access maintenance systems, trigger emergency protocols to herd them away from civilians." "That will put you in danger." "So we're doing nothing." She studied him for a heartbeat, then nodded. They split up, Ethan heading for maintenance control while Severin moved to intercept mercenaries threatening evacuation routes. Ethan reached the control room and started triggering emergency bulkhead closures, venting atmosphere in calculated sections that would force the Syndicate into corridors where Severin waited. He watched security feeds as she moved through combat with lethal grace, her ceremonial armor proving functional after all, her elegant movements transforming into devastating strikes that left mercenaries unconscious or fleeing. "3 more coming your way," he said through comms, guiding her like they'd done this for years instead of days. "I see them." Their coordination transcended tactics. Ethan anticipated her needs before she voiced them. She trusted his instincts even when they violated logic, each working to protect the other while completing their mission. Then a squad cornered him in the control room, their leader recognizing him as the pilot who escaped the debris field. The engagement became personal, vindictive focus that turned tactical into lethal. Ethan barely got his weapon up before plasma fire scorched past his head. He heard Severin snarl through the comms before she arrived, intercepting a shot meant for his spine. The plasma bolt caught her shoulder, spinning her against the bulkhead. Her pale skin scorched, her crimson tendrils going limp with shock. Ethan's response was pure instinct. No calculation, no strategy, just movement. He dragged her behind cover while laying suppressing fire with her dropped weapon, his accuracy terrible but his determination absolute. And Severin, watching this human who her culture dismissed as weak, willingly die protecting her, felt something fundamental shift in her understanding of strength. Station security finally arrived in force, joint Calvex and human teams coordinating evacuation. The cooperation itself demonstrated that working together was possible when necessity demanded it. Ethan and Severin made it to evacuation ships with Dr. Okonkwo, Severin's injury serious but survivable, her robust physiology already beginning regeneration. On the medical frigate carrying refugees away from compromised station, Ethan sat beside her recovery pod while doctors worked. Her tendrils were gradually regaining color and movement, the crimson returning in slow waves. "You could have died," she said, voice rough from pain medication. "So could you? You took a shot meant for me." "That is different. I am trained for combat. And I'm trained to fly ships, but I still figured out how to shoot straight when it mattered." He took her hand carefully, mindful of medical equipment. Somewhere between contempt and combat, I fell in love with you. That's terrifying because I've spent years protecting myself from attachment, and you represent everything I was taught to distrust. But none of that matters because you're the bravest person I've ever known. Severin's response came slowly, her amber eyes finding his. Calvex do not have direct translation for human concept of love. We have bonding protocols and reproductive contracts and tactical partnerships, but nothing that encompasses choice and vulnerability and irrational commitment to another's well-being above self-preservation. She paused, searching for words. What I feel for you has no name in my language, which means either I am experiencing dangerous psychological deviation, or my species has been lying about emotional capacity so long they have forgotten truth. Either way, I do not want to return to life before understanding this feeling. Ethan leaned down to kiss her forehead, careful of her injuries. Then we'll figure out what to call it together. Your species has very poor survival instincts, she murmured, but her tendrils wrapped gently around his wrist, holding him close. The aftermath unfolded across weeks. Dr. Okonkwo's testimony triggered full investigation into Calvex military contracting practices. Thrace and other officers faced prosecution. Human-Calvex relations entered period of tense negotiation, painful but necessary. Severin received formal exile from Calvex military, but unexpected support from reformist factions within her species who viewed her actions as return to authentic honor codes corrupted by supremacist ideology. The exile still hurt, but she was learning to build new identity based on choice rather than duty. Ethan discovered his reputation had transformed. People no longer remembered him as the pilot who lost his crew, but as the human who flew through hell and survived. His name appeared in dispatches alongside Severin's as examples of individual courage transcending species prejudice. Captain Quinn offered them joint contract as security consultants for independent stations, recognizing their unique partnership made them ideally suited for navigating complicated new political landscape. The final moment found them on the observation deck of their new ship, not the battered Persephone's Gambit, but a proper courier vessel with actual working systems. They watched hyperspace streams blur past while discussing their next job. Severin's shoulder had healed completely, her tendrils flowing freely now instead of held in rigid control, the crimson strands occasionally drifting to brush against Ethan's shoulder as he piloted. "Do you regret the complications my presence brings to your life?" she asked. Ethan reached across and laced his fingers with hers, human warmth meeting her cool touch. "Complicated is fine. Nothing worth having was ever simple." He grinned. "Besides, I've always been better at improvising than following plans anyway." Severin laughed, a sound he'd decided was his favorite discovery in the entire universe. "Then I suppose we are well matched. A human who trusts instinct and a Calvex who is learning that rules are not the same as wisdom." "Look at us," Ethan said, "proving that connection transcends biology when two people choose to see each other as equals." "Is that what we are doing?" "Yeah, I think so." She leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder in a gesture that would have horrified her former self. Public display of attachment, vulnerability, trust. But she'd learned that vulnerability wasn't surrender. It was choosing someone else's well-being over self-protection, and there was profound strength in that choice. Outside the viewport, the stars stretched infinite and indifferent. But inside their ship, two people from species that barely trusted each other had built something neither could have imagined in a docking bay weeks ago. Not just partnership or alliance, but genuine connection, forged through survival and choice, and the courage to see past everything they'd been taught. The universe was vast and complicated and often cruel, but it also contained moments like this: warmth against cool skin, crimson tendrils wrapped around human fingers, two hearts beating different rhythms that somehow found synchronicity. "Ready for the next impossible thing?" Ethan asked. Severin smiled, and her answer was everything. "With you always."